Welcome, guys, to episode 6 of the relationship series. This week I'm joined by Dickon Bettinger, who received his doctorate in counselling psychology from Boston University and has been a licensed clinical psychologist for 31 years. He co-founded the first 3 Principles Centre in the northeastern US. He was a senior staff member at Pransky and Associates, where he worked with many large businesses, and he's been teaching leadership and staff development programs for universities, corporations. He runs group seminars in the US and Europe, and in essence is very, very experienced in his professional life. In some ways more relevant to this, he's been married for 44 years. He has 2 adult children, 2 grandchildren, and he loves photography, hiking, canoeing, travelling, and his golden retriever. Hi, Dickon.
Oh, hi, Kush.
That almost sounded like I was reading out, as if I'm doing a kind of matchmaking service, but I'm sure your wife won't be too happy with that. So before we start, that's kind of the generic text in a way, but I mean, who Dickon is for me is someone that I met last year, and I attended a small course for a day and a half, which was bringing the principles behind state of mind into business. But what was really kind of clear was how Dickon had a really profound understanding of the principles behind state of mind, and a unique way of expressing that. And in such a short time, I was deeply impacted, and we've not met since then, but felt that we really connected, and someone who really gets it. And really intuitively, or it comes across, I don't know, you tell me, but feels like intuitively you understand relationships in business, but also outside of that as well.
Well, I like you, Kush, I've always been interested in learning anything that would help improve the quality of my relationships. So not just with my wife. Yeah, we just had our 45th anniversary, my wife Koizi, and then with my 2 kids, now my kids are 35 and 40, and now with my grandkids and with my friends, and so I've always been passionately interested in learning anything that could help improve the quality of those relationships. So it's a topic near and dear to me.
Yeah, and we were talking in the pre-call about how it's such a universal topic, and whether we're in business, whether we're in our families, whether we're with friends, it's the theme that kind of it touches on so many different areas of our life. I guess I'd love to start with if you could tell the listeners a little bit about your background and how you started as a psychologist and how your kind of career's gone, and just a little bit of background, really.
The brief story, I started as a high school English teacher, and I was 22 years old, and I looked younger than any of my high school students. And I think because I looked so young, and actually was so young, many students started coming to me and talking to me about problems they were having in their relationships. And so that got me interested in, well, what can I talk about with someone that might help them with their relationships? And I already had a pretty passionate interest in communication, so I would share with them things I had been learning about communication, and I was really quite surprised by how often that would make a big difference. And one day it just dawned on me that I could really study the whole field of what people have learned that they think accounts for having better relationships. And so I started reading every single book that I could find that would address that topic. I was a voracious reader. There was no end to that. I started going to trainings and workshops. And I went back to school, and both of my degrees, graduate degrees, were in the field of education, but they were studying people within the field of education who had learned about what people need to learn to have a higher quality life. And so when I got my doctorate in counseling psychology, I went on and became licensed as a psychologist because I thought that might be the most leveraged way to have an opportunity to help people with their relationships. And then for 10 years I practiced, and then I came across a teaching that helped me more than anything else I had come across in terms of helping people not only have better relationships, but just help raise their overall level of well-being. And so that's how I got involved in this, and that's what I've really been passionate about ever since I was 22 years old, and I continue to share what I've learned about that with people all over the U.S. and Europe now.
So thanks for that. I guess the obvious question for me really is, what did you come across that really helped you? And how was that different to perhaps what you were doing before?
In 1986, I was yet again in another bookstore looking for answers. And I came across a book, and it's now out of print, but it was a book called Sanity, Insanity, and Common Sense, written by a man named Dr. Roger Mills and a couple of other people. And it had a very different way of beginning to talk about the role that thought plays in creating your personal experience in life. And I got intrigued, and I think I even had an insight about halfway through the book that gave me a different perspective on things. So I went to a 5-day professional training program, and I came back to my practice as a psychologist, and I couldn't do any of the things that I had been doing before, and I had a very, very simple but different understanding about human experience. And I heard about that these people that I studied with had learned it from a man named Sydney Banks. And so I started finding out about him, and right away went out to California, and he was doing a training at a university there, and then I don't think I missed a single training he did for the rest of his life. He died a few years ago. So and it's what's now people now tend to call the three principles, because this man Sydney Banks had a profound awakening experience where he discovered three principles that can explain human experience. And it was practically, I just want to say this, it was on a practical level, it just helped me navigate all of the feelings I was having in my relationships with a different understanding. And it helped me begin to have more confidence in a different place within myself to get answers. So those two things, learning about where feelings were really coming from and having more confidence in a deeper intelligence than my puny little intellect.
thanks. That's. I didn't actually know that full story, so that I'm listening. And I'm so intrigued by what you're saying. So I'd love to know, kind of, because there's so many techniques out there that people employ about having better relationships, and there's so many people who are struggling in their various relationships, whether it's romantic relationships or, with colleagues or their bosses or parents or children. And I guess someone who's been at the front line in a way as as a psychologist, and finding something that's so practical. What advice would you give people who perhaps are struggling, or maybe even people who aren't struggling but just want a deeper connection, want a better relationship?
Well, what helped me initially was a very, very simple way of understanding what feelings are and where they're coming from. And it helped me immediately and in a very practical level, is that to begin to realize that there is a force that I'll call the power of thought. It's whatever is in life that is generating the mental activity inside my head and your head and everybody else's head. And it seems like that force just keeps generating content constantly. The content of our thinking comes and goes, but this power of thought never rests. It's always generating new thinking. And what helped me initially, and it seems so simple, but we can talk about how, when anybody begins to understand this better, I guarantee it's going to right away start helping you with what goes on in your relationships. And that is this very, very simple understanding that the power of thought is the sole source of anything you're feeling. Now that may sound simple, but I've asked literally tens of thousands of people, what are you feeling and where do you think your feeling is coming from? And it's rare to ever find anybody say, well, that's obvious, it's being created from thought. They'll say, well, I'm feeling angry because of what somebody said to me. I'm feeling stressed because of how much work I have to do. I'm feeling happy because the sun came out today. And you see that very innocently, if you think your feelings are coming from outside of you, in a relationship, it won't be long before you're feeling annoyed, irritated, impatient, frustrated, upset, angry, and you'll think it has something to do with the other person. The plot thickens right at that point. Things get difficult right at that point. I'm feeling impatient because of how you are. I'm feeling frustrated because you make a mess of things in the house. I don't feel like you're giving me what I need in order to be a happy person. It immediately complicates relationships if in any way you attribute what you're feeling in that relationship to the other person. It also complicates it because you look to the other person to help you feel happy or help you feel good, and you don't know that is already inside of you and is available to you, and that when your head clears of all of the thoughts that you have that make you miserable, you always come back to feelings of well-being. I didn't know that. Even as a psychologist of 10 years, I still thought my kids drove me crazy. I still thought when they made a mess of things that's what made me angry. Now, when I met Sid Banks, and he started talking about that he realized there's this power in the universe, the power of thought, that is capable of generating all the mental activity that's going on in your head, right? And that's the sole source of feeling. 100%. Oh my gosh. I can't tell. Right away it started helping me because I worried a lot. And then I thought worry had to do with what I was worrying about. And when I saw, well, worry is just thought, I started worrying less. When I started seeing that my impatience with my wife was just thought, I stopped blaming her for my feeling. Right? So that was, I mean, in a nutshell, I think any of my clients that I've seen, when they begin to see more and more deeply the simple truth that every moment of your experience is created from thought and not the outside world, I guarantee that will have an impact on the experience you have in your relationships. It will clean up your relationships better than anything else you might be able to learn. That's been my experience. Right now, I don't know how deeply you want to go into this or what else, so I'll just you let me know where you want to go with this, Kush.
No, that's lovely. I mean, I'm listening to you, and I really relate, and I can, I totally agree with what you're saying. And it's certainly been my experience as well. As I've deepened my understanding of how thought works, it's impacted all of my relationships positively.
Mm-hmm.
So just for the listeners, what would you say if someone said, well, there are certain people who make me feel better than others, or like you said, the other way around? Well, my kids drive me crazy. Would you say to them that you can have a really deep felt connection with anyone on the planet?
Yes, that when my head clears, I feel feelings of well-being, and when I'm in a feeling of well-being, I get along with anybody. When I have a feeling, like for example, in the beginning of a relationship, falling in love just means you get an opportunity to experience life where your head is free of negative thinking and judgment, or relatively free. And as soon as our head clears of that thinking, we start to experience warm feelings, right? So you feel very loving. And when you feel very loving and differences come up in your relationship, it's like, oh, sweetie, that's okay. It's no problem. We're very understanding. We compromise. We're flexible. We're willing to well, if it's important to you, of course we'll do that. And it goes really easily. And then people lose their good feeling and they think it's because of the other person. And then it gets complicated. If you lose your good feeling and you see that it has something to do with the fact of thought, it means that whatever you're feeling is temporary. Right? So the second thing I had to learn, there were two things, Kush, that helped me and I think can help any human being on this planet with their relationships. One is seeing how the power of thought is what's responsible for every bit of human experience. Every feeling that anybody has is created from thought, not created from something in the world of form. Nothing in the world of form has the power to create. Only the power to create has the power to create. The second thing that I learned is that there's an intelligence behind life that, number one, knows how to create everything that exists. And it knows how to operate everything that is created. So it'll create a bird, but it also creates the bird in such a way that the bird can fly and sing and migrate and eat, and it can just do all of those things. And so throughout the centuries, people have said that there's an intelligence that's far greater than IQ, or an intelligence far greater than that of the intellect, and people have called that intelligence wisdom. Well, I honestly didn't know that I was as connected to wisdom, as deeply connected to wisdom as any other human being on this planet. Now, what does that mean on a practical level? It means that whenever my head clears of all of my negative thinking, all of my personal thinking, and it quiets down, two things will happen. I'll feel better, which allows me to do better in life, and the quality of my thinking will improve. Now, when people spontaneously have higher quality thought, we'll say, well, that person has a lot of common sense, or they have a lot of clarity, or they have a lot of perspective, or they have a lot of good ideas, right? So when I'm having trouble in my relationship, if I know my feeling is coming from thought, and if I know that there's a wisdom waiting to break through my mind, my consciousness, when I wake up to the fact of thought and fall into the present moment, my head clears and I feel better and I think better, which always makes a relationship easier. If you take away good feeling from a person, they're going to have trouble in any relationship. I guarantee. They'll be nervous, they'll be anxious, they'll be walking around frustrated, angry, hurt, sad. Whoa, no problem having those feelings, we all do, but if you start living in them and then bringing them to another person, it gets old really quick.
Yeah. One thing that occurred to me, Dickon, as you were talking is there's a really interesting phenomena. It's not a rule; it's kind of a rule of thumb that I've seen. Is that when a couple is just newly married, you see them at a social gathering, and they are literally together all the time. You know, they're next to each other, they're smiling, they're happy. You know, and if you fast forward a few years and you see them again, you know, they might be kind of in the same room, but, you know, they're kind of doing their own thing. And you fast forward a few more years and they're in opposite rooms and they're just complaining about each other. Right? And what I really... And that's just seen as normal, right? And everyone laughs because they've seen that too.
Yeah.
And what I really found intriguing when I met you and your wife Cozy was around was just, it was so obvious, and it's not just you, it's other people that I've interviewed on this series of, you know, kind of being married for, like you say, 45 years, just how obvious it is how much you guys still love each other. There's no sign of that. I don't know if it's elsewhere in the world, but in the UK they call it the 7-year itch.
Yes.
You know, after 7 years people think, oh, maybe I need to find someone else, or, you know, and the divorce rates are so high. And what's really interesting is every single teacher I've interviewed has got a fantastic relationship with their partner, often after many, many, many decades.
That impressed me too in the get-go. I mean, I didn't know that I had perfect well-being inside, and that when my head cleared, that well-being would shine through the same way the sun is always there, and when the clouds part, it's just waiting to shine through. Right? So that I stopped looking for love outside of myself and started just being aware by my feeling the degree to which I was innocently blocking the flow of wisdom. So the more tension or upset in my feeling, that became a very friendly indicator that innocently I was blocking the flow of wisdom. Now remember, wisdom is what brings feelings of well-being and a higher quality of thinking. So that then it didn't matter that I got upset and angry and hurt and sad, but it's that feeling stopped meaning anything about my relationship with Koizi, and it started being a friendly indicator that I was caught up in thought in such a way that it was blocking the flow of wisdom. And when I would realize that, I would basically let go of what I was thinking, or I would stop thinking about what I was thinking, or I would just relax, or I would just fall back into the present moment. And inevitably, I would start to feel better and think better. Now I had something really valuable to bring to my relationship. So rather than bringing my upset that I thought had to do with my wife to her, and if you bring upset to somebody who's already upset, it's like putting gas on a fire. You know, it used to be we would do that innocently all the time. You know, we get upset and then try and talk about it. Right? So now we get upset. The feeling wakes us up to the role of thought and how it can impede wisdom. We do the best we can to just allow our minds to clear and quiet down. And then when we feel better, we come back then. And if you consistently bring well-being to another person, you bring out the best in them. And so you get closer and closer over time. Now, the cycle you're describing, Kush, is very common, is that people get into low-quality thinking. They think it has to do with problems or the world or other people or situations, and then they bring that complaint or that upset to the person they're closest with. And if you consistently bring negativity to another person, pretty soon it's like, oh God, and then you start to argue, and then you don't like it, and then you don't look forward to coming home, and then it's like, you know, I'd rather be around people who are happy and I can have fun with, and you're such a drag, and it just becomes an innocent, vicious cycle. But I tell you, from when people begin to learn that thought creates feeling, and that your feelings are friendly and they indicate the degree to which you're open to wisdom, very quickly it can turn around and you begin to then bring your well-being and your common sense and your good ideas and your good thoughts to the other person. You'll bring out the best in the other person. I guarantee you can turn a relationship around. No matter how bad it's gotten, you can improve that relationship, not by waiting for the other person to stop being the way they are, but by you bringing more health and well-being to them. And that became the secret. It was like, oh my God, relationships are simple. I take responsibility for my feelings. I do the best I can to look in the direction of wisdom. And when I feel better, or feel good, or see things well, I bring that to my wife. That's it. That's the key to having a healthy relationship with a friend, with somebody at work, with any relationship, with the person in your family that you've never liked, with the person at work that you've never liked. That's the key, and your well-being then is completely independent of what the other person does or doesn't do. You're like a fireman. No matter how bad of a house fire is in front of you, the only thing you can do is just keep bringing as much water to the table as you can. I learned that when I worked with a fireman. I had the insight. Oh my gosh. Sid Banks used to say, you can only bring to another person what you have. And if you have all kinds of negativity, that's all you bring to the person, you're going to bring out the worst in the person. Right? If you learn how to look within and find your own well-being and bring it forward, or allow it to come forward and bring it into the relationship, and make that what relationships are about. It doesn't matter how long, the longer you are in a relationship, the closer and happier you become.
we're fast running out of time, and there's so much more I wanted to ask you. But one thing I want to ask, which I've asked all my interviewers, just more for my personal amusement than anything else, is have you got any examples of where this is played out in your life, and hopefully slightly embarrassing because it amuses me, but because we've all had those times when we've been lost in thought, and then how it's completely changes the situation around.
Well, I think every one of my examples would fit into that category. Slightly embarrassing, oh my God. Because all of us at times get caught up in our thinking and we don't realize it's being created from within, and we attribute it to somebody or something. Mm. All of us, everybody. I still do at times, Kush. It's all relative, isn't it? So, let me think. There was I had a good example that just happened recently. We're on vacation. And the first week of the vacation, we were with our kids and our grandkids. And wouldn't you know, they show up for vacation sick as dogs. And Koizi and I are going, oh, we won't get it. We won't get it. We're healthy. We're not, we'll be careful. And so they're coughing and wheezing and sneezing and sore throats and headaches. And at the end of the week, they leave, and my wife and I stay on for another week. The day they leave, my throat gets so sore I can't swallow. And I go, oh no, I've got a whole week ahead of me with my wife, just the two of us on this romantic, beautiful island off the coast of Maine. Oh my gosh. The next morning I wake up and I'm sneezing and I can't breathe and I didn't sleep well. And I'm getting really annoyed and irritated and grumpy and I innocently, I didn't see at first that was my thought. I thought it was just, I'm feeling this way because I'm sick. I didn't go, I'm feeling this way because of how I'm thinking about things. And since I didn't see it, I brought it into my relationship. So I'd be sort of grumpy with my wife, or I'd be short with her. And since she was feeling so bad, she wasn't doing a whole lot better. And then it was very interesting. It was almost like at the same time we both just sort of woke up to what I'm talking to you about. I just all of a sudden realized that it was my thinking that was creating my upset. In particular, if I sort of look back on it psychologically, which I don't usually do, but it would be, I didn't realize I had so many expectations about how I thought that second week was going to be, and that expectation didn't include being as sick as a dog. Right? So as soon as I realized that what I was feeling, my grumpiness, my irritability, was not coming from my cold, or it was not coming from my wife, but it was being created from how I was thinking about things, it was almost like I just had a good laugh, got a fresh start, my head cleared, and it doesn't matter how sick you are, when your head clears, you're going to feel better and you're going to think better. All right? And that happened. And then, even though we were both sick as a dog, we had a very, very enjoyable last week of our vacation. And it could have been, if we didn't know what we knew about thought and wisdom, it could have been a week from hell where we got more and more on each other's nerves and got more and more negative and brought it to each other more and pretty soon we would be cursing each other or leaving and going home feeling miserable about not being able to have a good vacation, and blaming the grandkids.
Yeah. Well, thanks. That's it's such a great story, and I'm sure all of us can relate to kind of getting sick and getting grumpy about it. So I'm sure I certainly can, and probably more times than I'd care to admit.
Yeah.
But thanks. I think that's a really lovely place to end.
Wonderful.
I've had such a pleasure talking to you. I wish we could kind of go on for another.
Yeah, oh, me
hour,
too,
probably
Kush.
2
It's so
hours.
great to see you again and be with you and talking with you about this.
Absolutely. If people, because I know you work with individuals and you do courses, and if people want to get hold of you, how might they do that?
I think probably the easiest way is through my website. There's a contact page, and it emails me directly. The name of my business and the name of my website is the number 3 principlesmentoring.com. 3principlesmentoring.com. That's really the easiest way. Or you can just Google Dicken Bettinger and you'll get tons of stuff and you'll find me that way.
Cool.
Yeah.
And people can get hold of me through my website, uncasjane.co.uk, on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/UncasJaneLTD. I'll make sure all these links and Dicken's details are available as well to all the listeners. So thank you for listening. You guys will hear from me again, and thank you, Dicken, for being on the line.
Oh, thanks for having me. Great. Thanks, Kush. Bye-bye.